All right, what's going on, everyone? So a couple quick Iran war updates here. We've got some pretty significant developments that have already played out this Saturday morning. First off, the Houthis have now entered the fight. Yemen-based group just fired a couple missiles at Israel earlier today. My understanding is both of those were intercepted, but their entrance into the war on the side of Iran does add some unique new challenges to this conflict. We also got notification from U.S. Central Command that around 2,500 Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit have now arrived in theater. So when we're talking about the possibility of the United States putting boots on the ground, this is the first group that could do that. I mean, yes, technically we could have flown paratroopers in or special operations forces, some sort of infiltration like that. But when you're talking about a large force that could be used to seize an island, clear an island, establish a beachhead in Iran, this is the first group in theater that could carry out one of those objectives. I would still argue, and we've talked in recent videos, that it's way too small of a force to carry out much of that. But either way, significant that we now, for the first time in the war, have the boots on ground in theater should we decide to put boots on ground. Now, starting out with the Houthis, yesterday they put out an announcement from their military saying they were getting ready, they were thinking about it, they might join the war if, the United States and Israel escalate the attacks against energy infrastructure in Iran. They talked about maybe getting involved if the war expanded to other areas or if another nation joined the U.S. and Israeli alliance. And then just a few hours later, they said, that's it. We've seen escalation. In fact, their exact words were, quote, due to the continuation of military escalation, the targeting of infrastructure, and the perpetration of crimes and massacres against our brothers in Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, and Palestine, they entered the fight. Now, I'll pull up a map here to give you an idea of how this plays into the conflict. The Houthis based down here in Yemen, look, they're a headache, right? They're well dug in. We've carried out significant bombing campaigns against them just in the last couple years, right? But they're based down here in Yemen. So looking at the map, we've got Iran to the north, Persian Gulf, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Red Sea off the kind of northwest coast of Yemen. So overnight, it looks like Yemen launched a couple missiles at Israel. My understanding right now is both of those were intercepted. But the challenges that are now in play is that Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Israel, and maybe some others now have to be on the on the lookout, not just for Iranian missiles coming from this direction, but from Houthi missiles and drones coming from the exact opposite direction. So when you're emplacing your air defense assets that are limited for anyone in the world, they now have to be watching for the possibility of strikes from two different directions. Now, wherever you fall on the conversation about interceptors and the quantity that we have, if it's we have more than we could ever possibly use, or we're on the verge, or any of our allies are on the verge of running out, wherever you sit in that, there is a finite number, right? So now those defenses are being stretched just a little bit more. So there is a significant aspect simply in their joining, and now some of these countries having to look in different directions for the possibility of incoming munitions. Of course, with Yemen entering the fight, just 2 missiles earlier today, but every one of those is going to eat up more interceptors from Saudi Arabia, from Israel, maybe from U.S. ships as they start to push in near the coast. One that's not getting enough attention right now, we know the Strait of Hormuz over here is effectively closed by Iran at this point. One way around that has been Saudi Arabia shipping oil in a new pipeline to their west. And I believe, if we get the town right here, it was up here to the north. Yanbu, I believe, is the location here where a new pipeline was just built. And there's a significant amount of oil that Saudi has started shipping west to bypass this Iranian blockade or effective blockade at Hormuz. That pipeline is now a vulnerability. It would need to be protected across the entirety of Saudi Arabia. Just something to keep in mind. That's probably a soft target should the Houthis decide to go that direction. Of course, the big one here is if they decide to shut down shipping in the Red Sea. They have done it before. They are capable of doing it simply with a threat, let alone firing a couple drones or missiles into this area. But look at how narrow this Bab el-Mandeb Strait is. I mean, that's even more narrow, I think, even more narrow than the Strait of Hormuz. There we go. Both of them on the map. These are the 2 pinch points. All right, so we know this one's closed. The Houthis now, if they threaten and actually do close this, you've got a major portion of the world effectively cut off from any shipping in this area. Now, what we saw during Operation Rough Rider a little over a year ago is the United States massed assets in this region to try to open the shipping lanes by force, shooting down a lot of Houthi missiles and drones. We do have a significant naval presence, no doubt, right now in the CENTCOM area of responsibility. We haven't seen a lot of them push into the Gulf of Aden or the Red Sea. We might have to see that now with the Houthis actively engaged in this fight. Of course, the big thing we have to watch for is, do they decide to shut down the Strait of Hormuz? We know that, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. We know that is the asymmetric advantage that Iran has in this, is the financial, the economic impact that they can have on the United States, on Israel, and all of our Gulf allies. This would be a significant blow if the Houthis decide to go that route. In fact, to that end, there was a pretty interesting article that I wanted to share with you guys from Nadav Eyal talking about this in his Substack a couple of days ago, where he raises the question of, what if Iran thinks they're winning? Because you're seeing a lot of arguments and a lot of debate around how do you measure and how do you determine who is winning a conflict in the middle of it. And look, personally, I think it's a pointless conversation. I don't think it helps anything. Like, you need to accomplish the objectives of the conflict. And historically, countries are winning until they lose, or they're losing until they win. So I don't know that grabbing a point in time and coming up with whatever metrics you decide are most useful is the most beneficial way to measure progress in a conflict. But it gives you an idea of what these negotiations might look like or not look like. So Eyal here says, quote, security officials in Israel say the main problem lies in Iran's sense of victory. Iran is issuing international statements dripping with arrogance, demanding the removal of all American bases from the region and the collection of tolls by Iran in the Strait of Hormuz from every oil tanker. This is not posturing, I am told. The Iranians truly believe that they are winning. So what do you do with this, right? You have to be able to have such overwhelming military success that there can be no possible route to even thinking 5% that you have won. Because right now the Iranians feel, or at least the Iranian leadership that is making the decisions, feels that they have the upper hand. And to some of them, that means they're going to want to see this through a little bit further. They say one security source put it this way. Part of the problem with Iran's leadership right now is that it is so detached from reality, hiding and fearing for its survival, that it does not fully grasp the extent of the damage inside of Iran. As a result, it is not sufficiently incentivized to move towards a meaningful agreement. They said even Iran's gesture to the United States, apparently allowing some tankers to pass, is seen by the Iranians as recognition of their new status running the strait. It is not a kind gesture in their eyes, but a dominant one, proof of superiority. I think that's something we have to keep back of mind. Like, we can run the clips from CENTCOM of all the things getting destroyed, and look, 1-to-1, it's not close, right? Iran has lost a bunch of their senior leaders. They've lost a bunch of their missiles. They've lost a bunch of their missile launchers. Their Navy and Air Force are effectively gone. Their nuclear program is probably set back even further now than it was back in June. Like, no doubt, the United States has inflicted, and Israel have inflicted, significant damage on Iran. The casualty figures aren't close, right? Tragically, we've lost 13 Americans so far in this conflict. The last estimate I saw was in the thousands when we were talking about Iranians. Every metric, if you want to look at in terms of numbers, if you put numbers on a screen, the United States and Israel are winning that fight. But what if the people making the decisions in Iran think that they have the upper hand and that they are actually leading this fight right now and have a clear path to victory? Just something to keep in mind as we hear more about these negotiations. They either are or are not playing out. In fact, it sounds like they're getting ready to talk in Pakistan, but the last note I saw was that it was Turkey, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia that were engaged in the talks. Notably absent there, Israel, United States, Iran. So I don't know if the talks are actually going anywhere. But again, just something to have back of mind. We have to step away from what is the information that we're seeing and how we're observing the war, and just a little consideration to how are the people perceiving the war that are making these decisions inside of Iran. It may not be rational, but it'll help give a little bit of an insight into how they're responding. Now, this all comes as additional U.S. troops are flowing into the region. We mentioned just a moment ago that the Central Command announced that the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit has now arrived in theater. They said the America-class amphibious assault ship serves as the flagship for the Tripoli Amphibious Ready Group, 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, composed of about 3,500 sailors and Marines, in addition to transport and strike fighter aircraft, as well as amphibious assault and tactical assets. Again, a number of ways these guys could be utilized, everything from seizing Iranian tankers that are being let through the Strait of Hormuz and flowing to the east. They could be used in that capacity to board and seize some of those tankers. It could be reinforcing U.S. bases in the region. It could be helping to exfil Americans stranded in locations throughout the Middle East. Or, of course, it could be used in offensive capacity. The start of a buildup to push into one of these islands or any number of territories held by Iran in or around the Persian Gulf. We also got notification yesterday that the troop buildup is seemingly just beginning. It feels like every day now there's another announcement of more troops possibly heading over. So the Wall Street Journal just yesterday said, quote, "The Pentagon is considering sending another 10,000 ground troops to the Middle East, even as Trump weighs peace talks with Tehran." The Wall Street Journal, this is Wall Street Journal reporting, they say that would add to roughly 5,000 Marines and 2,000 paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division already ordered to the region. The additional troops would likely include infantry, armored vehicles, and logistical support. So rough back of napkin math there, you're talking 17,000 all of a sudden in the Middle East. Now, grain of salt, because they're talking about the Pentagon is considering, and as of now, we only know about the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, and there's another one, the Boxer Amphibious Ready Group, coming, set to arrive in like 3 weeks. The paratroopers from the 82nd, I feel like there's still some mixed reporting on that, and the 10,000 ground troops is just being considered. But again, man, like a couple weeks ago, the boots on ground was purely hypothetical. And everyone, for the most part, politicians were saying absolutely not. That is not something we're going to need to do. In fact, yesterday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said we can accomplish all of our objectives without putting boots on the ground. That's clearly a very sensitive line in the United States for a number of reasons, and it should be. But it seems like we blinked, and we went from, well, we don't even have the resources there to invade Iran or put boots on the ground and take over one of these islands to, if this plays out in the next week, 2 weeks, we're going to have 17,000 forces there, 17,000 personnel there able to carry out these missions. Again, that's a very small number when looking at the totals that we built up leading into the invasion of Iraq, for instance. So there's no indication that this is going to be like a large-scale march on Tehran by any stretch of the imagination. But again, every single day, we're seeing a little bit more of a creep. And add to this the challenge of the Houthis entering the fight, a little more complexity. And now we've got to, and when you're talking about wrapping up something to end this conflict, it's not just Iran, but it's some of their proxies as well. The proxies do not always take direct orders from Iran. It's a weird relationship. So as of now, it's not just Iran, but it's their militias in Iraq and Syria that are still today firing drones and missiles at U.S. bases. It's Hezbollah that has kicked off some of the heaviest fighting in a long time along Israel's northern border. And now it's the Houthis. Every one of those groups has their own independent objectives, has their own rationale for doing what they're doing. No doubt a part of that is tied to Iran, but none of them are to the point where Iran can flip a switch and just say, now you attack or now you stop. They have some influence, no doubt. I don't want to downplay that. But each one of these groups that enters the fight adds a little more complexity to finding a clean way of wrapping this all up. So it's going to be worth keeping an eye on the Houthis to see exactly what they bring into this. Now, for anyone interested, over on Substack, we've started consolidating all the content. So long form, short form interviews. We've got all the notes from the day, like a constant roll up of research as we're doing it. And then what I think is really cool, a community chat. So if you're on that platform, check us out. If you're not, go check out Substack. I think it's a pretty good platform. They've made a lot of progress here in the last few years, and there's a lot of really, really good, smart creators over there putting out solid work. So for those interested, the link will be in the description below. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.